Hello everyone, welcome. This is Megan. Today we are going to be painting a beautiful still life with a beautiful vase and some red berry sprigs for our fall and winter inspiration. I'll go over the supplies that you need for today's class. If you have any questions, please put them below in the comment area and I'm happy to help you out along the way. You can also send me a message on my email. So I took out several colors here for our picture today. I have a crimson here for the red. You could also use a brilliant red as well, so I could easily bring in a brilliant red to assist along the way. I have a beautiful ochre that I'll be using for the background to kind of give some warm tones, but we'll be brightening it up a little bit as well. I have two colored greens. If you had just phthalo green or just a light green, you could easily use the black or the white to lighten or darken. So use whatever paints you have on hand. But you'll need your basic primaries, which are blue, red, and yellow. And you'll need black and white to control the shade color or control the tone, which is the lightness per se. Okay? So those are some of the colors that I have for today's class. Put some of these aside. Black and white. In addition to your paints, you'll need a plate or a palette to mix your colors on. I also have a paper towel. In addition, a cup of water here to rinse my brushes and a pencil for sketching. Now I'm going to first paint the background initially and paint the background on the top and on the bottom. We're going to let it dry and then we're going to sketch our vase on top of that. We could sketch our vase now, but one of the benefits of doing it after is so we can still see our pencil lines, okay? So the first thing we can do is, if you wanted to take your pencil, you can figure out, and the bottom of my picture is right here, so you can play with that. But I'm going to have a platform or a table that my vase is sitting on. Now the vase is going to be centered in the table, so the top or the back line of the table is going to be just below halfway. So you can use your eye and use your pencil to do a line of where you want your table and your wall to meet. Mine was just below halfway. So it's not quite halfway. Halfway would have been right about here, but I went a little bit lower, okay? And it does not have to be a perfect line right now. You can see it's not perfect. That's okay. Okay. So the table on my picture is going to be brown in color. And the background for me is going to be kind of like an antique ochre with some brighter spots in the middle behind. So I'm just going to start painting and have some fun. I'm going to go ahead and take my ochre and open that up. Put it right on my plate. So you can see I have some ochre right here. And then one of the things that you may want along the way is you may want a little bit of white along the way. So feel free to take a moment to open your white. And you can use any brush. So you'll need brushes as well. We didn't cover brushes. You'll need an array of brushes as well. I'm just gonna get my brush a little bit wet. I may have like small, medium, and large brushes. Just an array of brushes, you'll be just fine. But you can use one of your bigger brushes for the background. So I'm putting just a little bit of white near the ochre, okay? And for me, my background is primarily going to be a lot of ochre, but you can play with blending some of these colors. And I am going to do kind of some funky vertical striping here for the background. I'm going to keep it a little lighter in the middle, but I like some of these streaks. They're kind of fun. Makes it look a little bit more antique-y. And I'm going to paint the top portion any background color of choice. So it doesn't have to be a flat color here. One of the things I'm going to challenge us with this class is to play with textures a little bit. For me, I'm going with some vertical textures. It's a choice that I'm making. See how this is a little streaky? That's intentional. I'm dipping my brush in a little water. I'm going all the way up to the top of the canvas, making it look a little antique-y. I'm kind of just running this line right here. Down here is going to be brown, so I can easily cover up any bleeding that may go over. And you can play with dipping your brush in a little water and moving this paint pigment around. While the acrylic paint is wet, it will move, but if it dries, it's not really gonna move that well. So you kind of want to be quick with moving it around if that's what your intention is. And I'm kind of flicking up and down and just moving some of these streaks around. So this is really can be anything that you want it to be. Maybe I put it on a little bit thicker and then I use the water to move it around. And you can pushing them with a little pressure, and you can see how the paint is moving. And you can turn your brush on the side or the wide brush stroke to play with how the paint is being applied. So experiment how you're holding your brush, experiment with how much paint you're using and when, and experiment blending these colors. If you wanted to try to do some of these like antique-y looking streaks, you could try that. To make it heavy, you just add a little bit more, right? You can go back and get a little water, play with how much water's on your brush. And I'm coming all the way down to this line here. I will brighten the behind here just a little bit. You can play with how texturized or how kind of flat you want your background to be. You may want to tuck some browns in the background. You may want to tuck in some reds. These are all the choices that you can make. Anything goes here. We're just painting the background of the wall. So I'm playing with just a lighter hue in the center area. You can always bring white into this space. So if you wanted just to paint it this ochre yellow, that's fine. No big deal. If you wanted to play with a palette knife to kind of add some funky texture, you could absolutely do that too. Depends on how antique-y you want to make this background look. So I'm just having fun, really. We don't always do kind of antique-y looking backgrounds, so experiment here a little bit. In the inspiration, there's a little bit of red, a little bit of crimson coming in. So if I wanted to get a little artsy here, I could take a dot of my crimson, put it on my plate, and I could get a palette knife just to show you what it's like to truly experiment. This is a palette knife, plastic. Comes in a lot of like basic paint, a lot of basic craft sets, like brush sets. So I'm just getting a little bit of that crimson on this. And if I wanted to do some kind of fun, like vertical streaks, could even use my finger to smudge a little bit just to add a little bit of extra texture. I'm doing vertical designs, but you can see how that kind of gives it a little bit of something different. The red that I'm doing here, and if you wanted to make this darker, you could. I could even do like a little bit of a line across the top. If you don't want to do this, you don't have to, but I'm here just to offer some different techniques along the way. I'm just kind of leaning the edge of this palette knife into, and I'm using my finger to kind of smudge it down a little bit. And I'm doing short and long brush strokes intentionally, see that? I'll probably tuck in some browns in here too to make it look a little less stark per se. I'm going to stay out of the middle. I'm not going to do too much, but this is just kind of a fun technique and texture that I'm just playing with as we're experimenting today. So if this is something you don't want to do, you don't have to. But we are going to have lots of reds, and this could just be a fun option for you to consider. So I'm just taking, there's not very much on here at all, as you can see. Just doing a little bit of like fun texturing, kind of smudging down. Again, it's okay to do some, if you wanted to do any. So it's always fun just to experiment a little bit. You don't need to do too much here. I will bring in some browns just to show you what it looks like. And I'm not going to do any of the red on the bottom. I'm going to keep the bottom a little bit more light in color. But I wanted to show you what a little bit of a different background could look like. And this type of experimentation is really fun because if you don't like it, you can always cover it up. But this gives it just a little bit of a different look. And a brown will complement this nicely. So give me a minute, I'll just make a brown for us. Let's see. So red and green will make brown. And I have a little bit of phthalo right here. So I'm just gonna stick a little bit of green nearby. And I'm going to, I could even use my palette knife. And I could mix a little bit of my red and my green together. And make a brown. It's always fun being playful every now and again. And you can always grab a little bit of this ochre to make a brown as well. So to make brown, it's yellow, blue, and red all mixed together. But you can also make a brown. This is like a greenish brown. You can also make a brown by mixing red and green or blue and orange. So you can just kind of use whatever colors you have. This is kind of like a mucky yellow brown, which is okay because it actually will go pretty well with my colors here. So I'm just going to add a little bit of contrast, just a touch with my palette knife. And if you don't like this, you don't have to do it. I'm just experimenting here, having some fun. Again, you could just do a little bit at a time. Like you don't need to have big, you don't even need to do the smudging like I am. You could make it look piecey and splattered like if you wanted to. Like you could just leave it thick like that. Like this is old wallpaper and or smudged paint. This is all up for your own interpretation. So I'll just do a little smudging here so you can just see it. And I'm just doing like a light dust of the brown. And you can play with your finger and see how much or how little happens here. See that? It's gonna add kind of a cool, and you could do thinner strokes kind of coming down. If you want it to kind of come down your wall a little bit. Again, if you don't like this, you don't have to do it. I'm just gonna do a quick smudge. And anything you paint that you don't like, you can always paint over. So this is just a little bit of an abstract take on how to make your background a little funky. So I'm just gonna add a little bit of brown over here as a fun complement. And that's a little wobbly for me, so I'm just gonna, I don't want it to be, I want these to come down fairly straight. So look, I did a little accident here. It looks like it's a part of it, like how convenient, right? So all good. I'm probably gonna lighten this background up with a little bit of white. So this is just me having fun. If you don't like this antique-y kind of rustic background, you don't have to do this. But for consideration, always good to have consideration. So I like how that paint splatter came out over there. I'm gonna try to do that a little bit over here. And it's just kind of running some thicker paint over and down. So I kind of want the brown to kind of not match, but be pleasing to my eye here. So I'm doing a little smudging and I'm doing a little bit of the other. So for me, that's pretty close. I think I'm okay with the browns. But you can see how it kind of tied it all together. So I'm going to take my palette and just stick it right in my water cup to get it right out of the way. The other thing I want you to do for the background is this whole middle area here, kind of like where my hand is. I want this to be lighter because our vase is going to go right on top here. So I'm taking a little bit of white and a little bit of the ochre. And I'm just going to make it a little lighter, just a little bit lighter. And what you could do is you could kind of smudge it with your finger. You could use a paper towel. You could just do some soft brush strokes. You kind of want this to blend in a little bit. So any way that you want to blend this in to kind of make it look a little normal and like not a ton of brush strokes, that would be a good thing. If you like the way that it looks like a little piecey, you can keep it like that. Maybe we just keep working it in, right? So I'm just working this in so it kind of blends in naturally. I'm just kind of going up and down, and you can see how it's brightening this space. And I'm just working it in with a soft hand. See how it's nice and lighter over here? Because we're going to put the object right in the front. So see how this is light here? I'm going to do a little bit of that over here. And I have white and ochre mixed right over here. So I'm just going to do a little bit of white and ochre. And you can paint over some of the brown or some of the red that may be in this area. No big deal. You can see how it draws your eye right into the middle. That is what we want. And I want to make sure this is continued all the way down to the bottom. So I want the baseline of the bottom of this wall where it meets the table or the shelf. I want this to be lighter down here. See how I did that intentionally? Because you're going to see that behind the vase. Okay. Now we're going to paint the bottom brown. Now I'm not really happy with this mucky brown, so I'm probably just going to take a minute and to make it look nicer. So I'll probably take a little bit of my yellow and find a brown that works for you. So I'm just putting in a little bit of yellow, and I'm going to be playful here with my colors and see what I can get for a brown. Now you can always add white to make your brown lighter. If your brown is more green, add red. My brown is very green, so I'm going to add some more red. And I'll add a little bit of this brighter red, this brilliant red, because that should be a little bit of the lighter pigment that I need to really brighten this up per se. So this should turn it a little bit more brown. It's really just a patience game here of finding the right brown that works for you. This is a little bit more red now. This is where you have to be open-minded of finding the right color for you. I want this brown to be not too dark, not too light. So right now it might seem dark, but I have some white here nearby. I added a green because it looked a little too red. So I'm almost there. I almost have like a milk chocolate brown. And I can always add a little bit of white to this to perfect. I kind of have like a dark chocolate brown. All right, so there's my brown right there. I am gonna lighten it up a little bit, but I can use this to at least get started. This is gonna look really dark, which is fine. But I could easily take a little bit of white, look at this, lightened up along the way. So I'm using my big brush, and one of the first things you wanna do is get a nice, smooth line that separates your wall from your tabletop. You can always bring in a little bit of white along the way, doesn't matter. And you want these lines to be really horizontal in shape. Try to not have like a lot of bend You can see we're creating a space here. Nice clean line will really get us going. And then you can play with how you bring in your lighter and darker colors. So the lighter tones of your brown will create some really nice highlighting on your table. So try to blend in lighter and darker browns along the way. See how I have some lighter tones over here and I have some darker tones over here. I'm just grabbing a little bit of white on my brush and just kind of going back and forth with my browns, with my brown and my white, just to be playful. If you want your tabletop to be lighter, feel free, but just have fun with this step. Paint your tabletop any color you want. If you wanted to make it initially a lighter brown, feel free to do that. I am just being in the moment. I'm not overthinking one thing or another. I am just being intentional to add lighter and darker colors here. And then I can make a call as an artist if I wanted to make it overall lighter, if I wanted to make it overall darker. So those are the choices that just kind of come up along the way. You don't always have to know up front. You can have an idea as an artist, but you don't have to know everything as you get started and as you paint. You can have a light idea, some, thoughts of what you might want to do. Even if you don't, just get started. I'm using a little water on my brush to move these paints around. I'm going to bring in a little bit some lighter colors here. Take a deep breath. I'm so glad that you're here with me. I hope you're enjoying this so far. And don't hesitate to put a little water on your brush to help move things around. The paint I'm using is pretty thick, so water can be very helpful and forgiving to move this paint around. So if you're using the Reeves paint that you may have received from me in the past, or if you have your own paint, some paints based on the quality can be a little bit denser than others. In some of my classes, I use basic like Blick acrylic paint. Some of my classes, I use my Reeves paints, which are a little heavier in body. Everybody uses different paints. So just consider using water if you need to kind of move things around with a thicker paint, if you want to. Sometimes it's helpful. Okay. And I am being thoughtful to do not a darker base. My red vase on top of this is really going to stand out. I do know that I want to do some lighter tones kind of tucked in, but I can always add those lighter tones on top of the dark. So again, be playful, open-minded to how dark you want to fill this in, but you're going to fill the entire bottom part in. Now during this class, if you need to take a little bit more time for yourself, feel free to do that. Everyone paints at their own speed. And always make your own choices. If you don't want to do a certain technique that I'm doing, do not do it. Make your choice on what you want to try, what you feel comfortable doing, and what you don't. It's all good. I always like giving you options. That's always a fun part of painting, knowing what your options are. And I'm bringing in a little bit of lightness. I'm trying to do really straight, highlighted areas. They're not perfect. This one's not perfect. Just makes it look more linear, like a table, when you have a little bit more of a straighter line. See, there's like a little bit of a bend here. I'm gonna try to fix that. Just making it a little bit more straight. And these are just little techniques you pick up the more you paint. If you paint with like that bended line and filling in, you may start to train yourself to paint a little bit more straight. it does look different when you have a little bit of a bend in your paintbrush stroke compared to when you paint intentionally with a truly straight line. More straight. No, we're not ever perfectly straight, like, let's be honest here. So there's a little bit of bend. That's okay. Could be, a little bit of texture on the table. You could also add some like truly darker tones. Again, I'm only gonna spend a couple more minutes here, but I wanted to show you what it's like to play with the lighter and darker areas of this table. Because we're gonna let this dry. And if you wanted to add any other lighting detail, to the table, you may, like more highlighted areas. Okay. So I'm probably going to be okay with this for right now. I'm just going to look around to see if there's anything else that I want to do. Otherwise, I'm going to let it dry. I am going to put away my big brush, and I'm going to add in just a little bit of some lighter contrasting areas. So I grabbed a smaller brush. This is probably a number 3 or a 4. If there's a small gold number on the side, my number is rubbed off. But I'm just going to grab a little bit of white and a little bit of brown, and I'm just going to have a little bit of fun here. And I'm going to dip my brush in a little water. But I don't want it to be dripping, so always do the water brush technique of, like, if it's dripping off the edge, you probably don't want to use it. And this is just a little bit of extra highlighting for the table. So we're going to put the vase right on top of this. Not doing very good with my straight lines today. So a little water, and I'm going to keep that back line nice and dark, but I'm just going to tuck in just a few of the a lighter highlights here and there, just to be playful. If you don't want to do this, you don't have to. Just adding a little bit of texture to your table. If you wanted to use your finger to kind of smudge some of this in, you can. But I'm gonna let this dry once I'm done playing with some of these lighter areas, and we're going to do the sketching on top. So you can see the background has a lot going on. There's like a fun funky wallpaper where I have some fun funky paint splatters. Like this is like a 1920s home or something. And I'm just doing some lighter techniques with a little water, a little bit of white and brown. Just down here below, I'm smudging it with my finger. Just to add a little bit of lightness here and there. So I'm going to be patient and let this dry just for a minute. I'm actually going to put my brush down, and then we can talk about some of the composition next. So the top for me is totally dry, and the bottom for me is almost dry, which is good. So whenever you're done with your brushes, just go ahead and clean them off. You can keep them in your water cup, or you can wash them and then take them out. That's absolutely fine. If you need to get a cup of water, grab a cup of tea, feel free to take a minute to do that. At any point you need to pause this video, feel free. Okay. So we'll talk a little bit about the sketching for the vase next. So you can define the size of your vase and the shape of your vase. That's probably one of the most important things, because you're gonna fill it in with your still life around it, okay? Now the bottom of my vase, in the inspiration, it comes up pretty high. It's really right around here. So there's a lot of brown below it. So I'm gonna put a little line. Now I'm gonna center my vase. So you can decide, you can decide if you wanna center your vase or not. I'm gonna center it just because to keep things simple today, but if you wanted to not center it and have like your berries spill over, you could do that too. But the bottom of my vase, I'm going to find the center roughly, and I'm just going to put a little line down here. It's right on my fingers. For the bottom of the vase. And then I'm going to find where I want the top of the vase to be. I want it to be above the wall, above the table line. And you get to figure out how tall you want your vase to be. So the bottom of my vase is down here. If I do the top of my vase here, that could be good. I also have plenty of room up here for my foliage, right? So I'm going to find my line down here. I'm just going to kind of come straight up and just do a line for where I want the top of the vase to be. Now your vase could be short and wide. It could be tall and thin. It could be tall and rounded. You can decide the shape of your vase, okay? So this is where I want you to decide how wide the mouth of your vase is. So it does not have to be wide. Maybe that's how wide the top of my vase may be. And then you're just going to do one side at a time. And you're going to sketch. And you're going to make your vase as wide and narrow as you wish. And you're just going to come down. I'm going to do the same thing on this side. And we're using pencil, so you can change the shape as needed. And so I might make my vase a little wider on the bottom. And I know you can't see how wide mine is on the bottom, but you can decide how wide. So my vase is shaped like this. It comes up and down, and it comes to about here. Now you want it to be fairly even on the left and the right. I'm probably not going to know until I start painting it. So once you have a base shape for your vase, you can paint it. So I'm just going to start painting mine because then I can modify the shape, but overall it's what I want it to be. And I'm going to use this Brilliant Red because it is lighter. I'm also going to mix a little bit of the Brilliant Red with white so it stands out on this dark brown. And I'm going to clean that big brush off well. I'm not using a very good big brush today. All right, and I'm gonna get a little bit of extra white. So I'm gonna mix white and red together just to help cover up that brown. And it's gonna give me like a pink color, so I'm not too worried about that, but it's gonna help cover it because we're doing 2 coats of paint anyways. So I mixed my white and red, and I'm keeping some of my red. You can see it right there because I can grab it if I need it after. But I am just going to, with my big brush, and of course you don't want to start painting until everything else is dry here. I think my brown is dry. Yeah. And you can see how it's covering the brown nicely here. But this is where you can kind of follow the edge gently to just get your base color for your vase in. So I do horizontal brush strokes. And if you're using a heavy bodied paint, it's going to cover the brown more quickly. But you can see I'm doing smooth brush strokes down, like the shape of the vase. We are doing 2 coats on the vase. I'm coming in and kind of grabbing some of the red along the way here too. The 2 coats will help cover the background colors. But take your time. Outlining the vase. Going nice and smooth along the edge. And this will also help you get the shape right. So if you needed to take longer on doing the pencil shape outlining, just always take your time. No rush. We're going to be doing another coat for the base, so no big deal if your lines and your brush strokes aren't perfect. We want your edging on the left and the right and the bottom side of the vase to be nice and clean and straight. Clean edge. It's really important. And if you can still see the background, don't worry. I'm just letting it dry patiently. Because we're gonna come in and do another coat. So it's a little bit of the patient factor of just kind of doing one thing at a time and coming back to it. So you can see the shape of my vase. It's centered. I have brown all the way around it, which I like. I did intentionally. Everybody's vase is gonna look a little different. Okay, so my vase is drying. I'm gonna do, if you wanted to use a smaller brush for some of the outlining detail on the top, you're welcome to switch into a smaller brush. Like, so for me, I'll grab a little bit of this reddish pink and I can just do some nice clean lines. We're gonna put a lot of leaves and berries on this vase and kind of coming around, so just do a base coat and then just know we're gonna add more to it. So you can see my vase is really just starting to come to life. My shape is not perfectly even, which is okay. We can modify that. So as an example, grab some more paint. I'm gonna grab a little bit more red. And this is drying as I'm talking, right? So that's a really good thing. A little bit of white, a little bit of red. Kind of reshape as you go. So this is where you kind of reflect as an artist to get the shape the way that you want it to be. You kind of lean back in your chair to get it right. And again, a little bit of white is really helpful. It will really help stand out and like help cover up the brown. So I'm going to take a scoop of white and mix that in with my red again because that was really helpful for me. So a little bit of white, a little bit of red. Makes a pink color. It's okay. It just helps with coverage. That's really the most important thing right now. But the shape of our vase is important. We want to be happy with the shape of our vase. We will be using depth techniques to bring our vase to life, but we're starting out with base colors. If you want to go in and do a second coat, if it's ready for that, feel free. It might need to dry a little bit more. We are going to give this time to dry, by the way. All right. So what we'll do as that's drying is we'll start to do some of our branch-like detail. You can tell my vase is not done. I'm letting it dry so I can kind of firm up some of the other shapes. But we're going to use some of the brown to do some fine twig-like detail, okay? And this is going to be the structure for the foliage for the entire picture. So if you need to take more time doing your vase, that's fine. My vase is not done. It's not even, the second coat isn't even done. I'm just letting it dry. So when I do more paint, it will actually stick and hold on top. So for this next step, it's actually going to be quite liberating here. I'm doing twig-like structures that are inside of this vase. They're going to have red berries and green leaves. It's going to be quite pretty. I'm going to use a small brush of choice. This is a number 1 brush. There's a small gold number right here. I want a brush that has a nice tip. This brush is almost new. It hasn't been used too heavily, which is nice. And I'm going to use this brown paint that I have right here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a couple of healthy dollops of brown. And I'm going to make a little bit of a water wash. So I'm not applying thick brown paint for the branches. I'm applying more of a thin brown paint. It's going to help us be more fluid with our branch, like brush strokes. Okay, so you can see I have some on my brush. It's pretty watery, and I'll show you again what the consistency is. You can move it around pretty easily. I'm spinning the brush. You can see it's not goopy. It's just like a wet brown paint. So this is what you're going to do. One of the ways to have a loose hand to do your branches is to hold your brush a little farther back. See where my fingers are? Instead of holding it way up here, more precise, you can make more loose style branches. So if you want to go halfway to compromise, you can. So what you're going to do is you're going to find just an area and you're going to do your first branch. I'm going to do an odd number of branches. I might do 7 branches. So I might just start with the first one. You can make these branches as thick or as thin as you want to. You can see how I wide the end here. So just start with one branch and then figure out where you want it to have like a secondary branch. See that? Because these secondary branches are going to have berries and leaves on them. So we're going to create a pot or a vase with some branches first. So that's a branch going up to the left. I'm going to do another one, it's going to come down. Now it doesn't need to go all the way off the edge. Just follow your gut, follow your intuition. Do that primary branch. And just do a couple of secondaries. You can always make these branches bigger. Just keep that in mind. I'm just doing one more here to fill in the space. See how it's still really simplistic though? I'm not going heavy with branches. I'm just following my intuition. I'm getting a little more water, mixing it with my paint. I'm basically going to replicate this on the other side so we can put our berries and put our green leaves on our branches. So maybe I'll just start over here. And this one's going to have berries that are going to come down just into the on top of the wall of the shelf in the background. So you can see I'm just going to bring this down a little bit more. And I could do the same thing over here, just bringing this down just a little bit more. Okay? Again, make sure you have water and brown paint mixed together. It's helping and it's making it a little more fluid. You could go over it again if you wanted to. Make a Y, add a secondary. Add those secondary branches. I kind of alternate from the left side of the branch and then I go to the right. See that? See how they're evenly spaced too to the eye? You could consider something like that. And I can always make these branches bigger if I need to. going to start another. So that was a little bit of a watery branch. That's okay because you can always come in. Branches for me are more thin and narrow on the ends. I'm holding my brush about halfway right now. We're going to be putting berries and leaves on top of most of these branches, so don't sweat it too much. We're just giving structure to our painting. Okay, and I'm going to add one more. Again, I'm mixing more brown paint with water else as I go to find that consistency. There's a nice balance between too much paint and too much water. I'm also playing with having some of my branches overlap. And I tend to do the tips of the branches, kind of just flicking them out a little bit. You can easily have branches that kind of overlap one another. You're going to find a good mix, right? So you can see I can still see the background. See how I can still see that bright background through this? There's still spaces in between my branches. That was intentional as I do my branches. You don't need to go too crazy. I'm probably really close to being done here with my number of branches. So just don't go too branch crazy. Make some choices about secondaries and then just stop and kind of reflect on where you're at. It's okay to have kind of empty branches and twigs, but we're going to be filling this in together. Okay. I am going to do an intentional branch on the front of my red vase, but I'm going to fill this in first, okay? And we're also going to put red berries and a couple little twigs on the table below, okay? So I'm going to let my branches dry. I'm going to go back to my red vase and fill it in entirely. So take more time on your branches if you need it. I am happy with my branches. I'm going to go back to my red vase and fill it in. I want to be happy with the overall shape, and I want to fill it in as much as possible here. Trying not to see the brown through it. We will add shading and contrast to our vase momentarily. We're just getting that base color in, that base coverage first. And I'm coming back in with just red right now, and you can see how I'm doing red really on this, like the right side, and you can see it's really holding strong on top of that pinkish color I had. Doing a nice clean edge. See that nice clean edge that comes down and around? That's exactly what I want. If it's still wet, just let it dry. And I am using this Brilliant Red. I'm going to be bringing in darker colors to the right side and lighter highlights to the left, but we'll do that after. So we're going to just do our full coverage for our vase, and then we're going to go back into our berries on our leaves. And we'll do the vase last because we want it to be totally solid in color. Now, if you didn't want to do a red vase, I would hope you would have chosen a different vase color. I think if you've taken these classes before, you would have known that. But if you hadn't, you can obviously do a different color vase. In these classes, I'll always encourage you to pick and choose your colors along the way if you don't want to do what I'm doing. I always will welcome you to follow your own ideas and intuition in these classes, always. So I'm just using a nice smooth brush stroke, and I'm just doing solid red right now. I'm not doing any depth, and I'm letting it dry, okay? Because it needs to dry. So everybody take a minute or two to play with that. And then we're gonna go in and do our red berries together. And we'll use a small brush, and we're gonna do rounded berries all over. And holding space for our green leaves as well. But we'll do our red berries first. But I'll let you finish your red vase. Just do a coat, let it dry. And I'm gonna put more red paint on my picture, or on my plate. So the base red color of the berries is gonna be the same color as my vase. And then we're gonna add depth to the berries as well. So today's class is a little time consuming, but it's really fun to kind of take a few extra minutes with our still life. Now I have extra red paint right here. And I'm mixing a little bit of water. I'm using a thicker red paint today. So I'm just using a little water just to kind of stir it around. I want to be able to manage this so it's not too goopy. So I want it to be easy to glide. Very similar to the brown. I want it to be easy to glide, easy to paint. So I'm kind of getting this red paint consistency to a nice smooth consistency. I don't want it to be too thick, and you can see I'm playing with that right here. So when I pull my brush up, it's manageable. Okay, so here's the name with the red berries. We're doing clusters, and there's going to be a lot of berries in each cluster. So the first thing that you need to think about as an artist is the size of a berry. So start somewhere, anywhere is fine. I'm just gonna start down here, and I'm just gonna do a berry shape. And I'm gonna say, Megan, is this too big or is this too small? Well, I can't make it any smaller, so. That's gonna be like the biggest size of my berry. So for me, I'm not gonna go bigger than that. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna tuck in little berries, smaller in size. They can be touching, they don't have to be touching. I'm gonna put green around these berries. They don't have to be perfectly round, but these berries are gonna be all along this branch. So I'm gonna do a cluster of berries. And they can go right on top of the branch. They're not perfectly round, they're not perfectly perfect. You can have some smaller berries too. I'm focusing on a visual cluster. See the cluster I'm creating? It's gonna come down, and I'm painting this next berry right on top of the branch. See that? And some of the berries can touch, right? That makes it a little bit more natural. If you're painting berries on top of the brown, you can always mix a little bit of white in. I'll probably just roll with that here for a minute. So I might mix a little bit of white in with some of these berries just so they stand out. And then I can kind of come back in on top and make them. And as the berries kind of come towards the end of this branch, I can make them big or small. These are just choices that I can make. So maybe I decide to end this one like that, right? This is one cluster of berries. It could be bigger, it could be smaller from a cluster perspective. Just start, we're doing a lot of clusters, so just start painting clusters of berries on your picture. Play with the sizes. I'm gonna make this cluster a little bit bigger. So I want you to kind of draw an imaginary line around your cluster saying, do I want this to be bigger? I want this to be smaller. So this one I'm happy with. So you can see I visually created a cluster of berries. They're not all the same size. I'm not going for perfectly round berries today. So I'm going to do another cluster here. And the trick is to do small berries and big berries. That is what will make your picture look realistic. Again, some of your berries can be touching. I'm holding my brush in the middle. This is where you can be playful with kind of the placement and the angle where your berries may be touching, where they may not be touching. Doing some bigger berries and some little berries. Some of these may look like flowers versus berries, but we will make these look like berries with little black dots in them. Some of these may look like petals, so I can always round these a little bit more if I need to. So like if I'm being a little too abstract here with my berry size and my shapes, I can always be more disciplined to make them more perfectly round. So that's something to consider, right? Everybody does things a little different. I'm going to do a little red berry right in here. And I'm being intentional of making that one a little more round. Okay? Maybe there'll be a little berry on the end of this stick right here, end of this branch, and then the end of this branch. Maybe there's a little berry here. So you can build your clusters. And then I'm going to move to this corner. See how there's two visual clusters. Small and large. Being intentional to make some of them round. I do like it that some touch. It's actually quite fun that some of the berries touch because they're kind of layered on top of one another, right? Some may be behind, some may be in front of. And that may make some of you feel uncomfortable. If your berries are touching, you may not be used to some of that level of like abstract and in painting. But give it a try, see how it feels. Now you could go really dainty and delicate. Like these are very dainty, not overly crowded clusters. I may like that as an artist today. So you could always start out more simplistic like I am, or you could add more. So I could start and continue with my simple clusters, maybe go in and add my green leaves. And then if I want to add more berries, I can always add more berries. Okay? So you can see I'm creating some actual space around each of these clusters visually for the green leaves. So I'm going to have green leaves here and over here and over here. So anywhere that I don't have berries, I'm going to add in some green leaf sprigs. So look, I'm being intentional. This sprig right here will have green on it. There'll be green leaves here. There'll be green leaves here. And I'll have green leaves here. And maybe a little bit of green leaves here. So if you need to add in any more twigs, you can always do that. But be intentional of where you may want to have some room for your green leaves, which we'll do next. But just focus on your berries for right now. But be understanding and open to what's coming next. So it's a little of intentional planning, but you can still be in the moment as you do your berries, whether your berries, again, are touching, they're small and large in size. Some of your berries may be perfectly round, some of them may not be. It's all good. Maybe there's just a couple berries on the end up here. Do a couple berries. You could be simplistic. You may not want a ton of berries. Okay. We're going to be adding secondary colors to these berries to really bring it all together, to add some depth and dimension. We'll be adding a darker color to the berries and a lighter color. Should be fun. And if you don't want to add green leaves, like if you want to kind of keep it simple, like an oriental look, kind of like this, you could. Those are some of the choices you can make. Anything goes. Bring this down, this cluster down just a little bit. But I hope you're enjoying this. What a beautiful and different picture for us today. It's a really fun inspiration. In these classes, we always like to mix it up, and it's really fun. You can see how my like antique-y background, it came out really funky and cool. And I'm glad I took the time to do that. And you can see the brightness in the back behind this vase is really standing out. Those were all things that were done with intention. Okay, so I'm going to shift to my lower set of berries here. And again, you can downsize to a smaller brush if you need to. I'm using a number 1. It's working fine for me right now. And then you can figure out how and where you want to add berries. Now, I've taught a bunch of classes, and one of the things that I've seen with similar inspirations is that people don't add enough berries. So you may or may not be one of those people that are doing smaller clusters. Consider adding a little bit more if you feel like you may not have enough. Don't do the berries just on the branches, like under the branches or connected to a branch. Do it right on top of the branch. That will make it look more natural. Some of the berries can be touching, which is good. Also natural. Your berries can also be floating. Like if there is not a branch right there, don't worry. We can connect it with a little bit of green after. And I am going to bring some berries down below into the brown like I did over here, so it matches visually. And so I'm going to just bring a little bit of white on my brush with a little bit of red just to kind of cover up some of the brown, just to figure out where I want these berries to come in. So for me, I'm just going to do a few just to see what they look like. And I'm trying to keep them a little small. Let's see what I can do here. I don't want to go too crazy, but I might do a nice berry cluster over here just to really help bring it all together. So this is where my berry clusters may get a little, this is going to be a bigger berry cluster. You're going to see, so see how visually it's a little bigger over there? That means I might need to add a couple more, right, in other places to balance the eye. So like for me immediately, I need more up here. Just maybe one more big one will kind of help hold it down visually from a red perspective. And I could probably make it a little heavier up here, but I want to end this with a little bit of a couple small berries. There. Okay. So you're going to figure out where you want to add berries, what makes sense to you. And we'll shift. Since I went heavy down there, I might add a few more berries up here just to kind of help manage the weight of color. So that one for me, these two look similar now visually. That one's fine up there. I may add a little bit of a red berry cluster here. So this is where you just use your eye and you just kind of make some choices. I'm gonna add a couple more berries over here to the left, or to the right rather. And then I'll show you what some of the secondary detail looks like for our picture today. Okay, so I can always add more berries if I want. These are good base colors. So one of the things that we'll do next is we'll let our berries dry. We're gonna switch to green, okay? So we did base colors for berries. We're gonna switch to green. So for green today, you can use your phthalo green, or you can use your light green. You could actually use both if you wanted to, if you have both. So I'll just show you what both look like so you can kind of pick and choose. Phthalo is a little bit more of an emerald green color, and light green is a little bit more of like a lighter tone. Imagine that. So I'm just going to put both on my plate so you can see how I am going to be playful and use both at the same time. So if you don't have both at the same time, you can make, if you have phthalo, make a lighter phthalo to go with it. So I'm going to be a little playful here with my leaves. I have a brush. I'm going to use this is a number 3 brush. You could use a number 1 or a 2 or a 3. I'm going to be really careful. My leaves are going to be fairly small in size. They're going to be just a touch bigger than the berries. They're not going to be too much bigger. So I'm being thoughtful of the shape of my leaves and the size of my leaves before I even get started. So what I want to show you is the leaves can have a two-tone to them. So what I'm doing is I'm going to spread out this green, light green, a little bit here. And I'm going to spread out, look at this, the phthalo. Now my phthalo is really thick, so I'm probably going to put a little water in it. Remember how some of the reds were thick? You can always just take a minute to kind of thin out, make your paint a little bit more manageable. You don't have to use it the way it came. So maybe just add a little water, just kind of swirl it around. This is just getting your paint ready for it to be used. It's kind of like when you make muffins. You want to mix all those lumps in before you want to have a nice smooth batter before you put it in those muffin tins. Very similar. There we go. So it's a little more smooth. And you can test your brush. Is it thick? It's a little thick. I'm just going to put a little bit more water in this phthalo. Just take a minute. Mix it in. And I'm going to do two-tone leaves. So the phthalo is much more manageable now. See how much more smooth it is on my brush? That makes it more manageable. And I'm going to take a little bit of the green. And I have 2 colors on this brush. So this is a fun technique to try. If you don't want to do this, you don't have to, but if you're open to trying fun things, feel free. So I'm going to do some leaf-like shapes on my branches. So just start, and you want them all to kind of look like one another. You can play with where the dark green is, you can play where the light green is. And you can kind of play and mix the paint colors around, it doesn't matter. But these leaves are going to be on, you really just want, you want to have a manageable amount of paint on your brush, but these leaves are going to be on both sides of the branches. So I did 3 leaves. I'm gonna go do 3 more leaves on the other side of the branch. And you can see, I'm not filling them in yet. So you can play with if you want to fill them in or not. But I want you to visually play with the shape and the size of the leaf. Where do you want to put a leaf? Where does it make sense for you to put a leaf? I'm being very thoughtful. I'm playing with both of these colors, so this is just me being playful here. I may, and you don't have to put your green leaves tucked in all over. You can just tuck them in maybe on one side of the berries. So for me, maybe it's just on this side. Okay? And you can have sticks coming out the ends without leaves on them. That's okay. But I'm not painting them in yet, so I'm just being thoughtful of doing outlines. So I'm going to do outlines first, so I can figure out where I want to put leaves. Don't get worried or carried away about how you fill these in yet. You can have sticks showing with no leaves on them. So use your eye and add leaves in where you wish. You can have half leaves, you can have just skinny little leaves. Spin your brush and your paint to manage how much paint is on that brush. I'm making some choices of not putting leaves everywhere. I'm being intentional as an artist of where I want to add leaves. Try this. You'll get a different style. And then if you feel like it needs more leaves, go in and add more after. Sometimes it's liberating to think about doing things differently because you'll surprise yourself on how things come out. Or, oh, I didn't know I could do it that way. Or, oh, I like this, I like the way it came out for these reasons. Different things will stand out to each of us for different ways, really. I'm playing with my light green and my phthalo. There's no method to my madness here. I'm just playing with both this time. I'm just being playful of where I want to put my leaves. Now I am going to tuck some green leaves into some of these berries over here. It's just a choice I'm making as an artist. We are going to be adding some red, darker red contrast to these berries, so they'll stand out just like these are here. Maybe at the end of this leaf, at the end of this branch is a leaf. Do you see what I did there? You can tuck leaves behind berries, like that. But again, play with how much water is mixed in with your paint. Is your paint too thick? Do you need to use a smaller brush? You can do small leaves and big leaves. Now I'm going to try to not do too many leaves. We'll see how that goes here. But I am going to do on the left and on the right. I'm gonna try to keep it simple. We all know how hard that is sometimes if we have an idea and how hard it is to follow that. But that's just us taking our time to try to be intentional as an artist. Now we're freehanding these leaves. If I really wanted to execute a very thoughtful design, I could hand like sketch with a pencil on where I wanted each of these leaves to go. And I'm making a choice to not do that today due to our time together. So I'm being thoughtful and talking about being thoughtful out loud so you can kind of make some of the same choices. Okay. So you can see I have similar, on each side over here, and I have each side over here. That matches. I have little bits and clusters kind of tucked in here. So look around visually to see if you have what you need and where. I may have one more leaf come off the edge here. You don't ever want to have a leaf by itself, so it's always good to have a cluster of 2 or 3 leaves if you're doing like a simplistic area. And then you can fill these leaves in as you wish. You could use a little water. Part of these leaves will be lighter in color, so if you wanted to do like a darker side of the leaf first, you could. I'm also going to do some leaves coming on top of the vase too. So for me, I'm going to fill these leaves in, figure out if I want to add any more or not. I probably will. And we'll do our leaf filling in here together. So I'll show you that just so you have a little bit of guidance. Okay. So I'm going to go with the darker side of the leaf first. So on one side of the leaf it'll be darker, on the other or even in the middle it'll be lighter. So I'm going to use this phthalo green, which is a darker color, to fill in these leaves. And if you wanted to leave some of the, like one side of it a little lighter, you can. Now that's the darkest, that's my phthalo green right there. If you want it to be darker, you can add a little bit of black. I'm gonna go with this color. And I'm gonna just fill in most of the leaf color with just the phthalo. And I'm picking one side, and one side is going to be darker than the other. You can see I'm leaving little pieces that are not filled in. I'm going to do those little pieces lighter green. So you're just filling in piece by piece. So you can see the contrast. We are adding darker red to these berries, so don't worry if they look boring and light right now. We will be adding depth and dimension to them as well. So the depth for these leaves is that part of the leaves will be dark green, part of the leaves will be a lighter green. But start to fill them in. Some of you may have already be doing that along the way. Totally fine. We all have our different process when we paint, and always just follow your own intuition of how you want to do things. I'm never going to tell you to do it a different way because there's no right way. There's ways that work well, better for some than others, but you just always do you. You can see how nice that contrast is for these leaves. So some of the final steps that we have in today's class is we'll be adding contrast and depth to the berries, and we'll be adding depth and contrast for our vase. And then we'll be adding just a few berry sprigs, maybe leaf sprigs on top of the vase too. So more to come there. Some of you may have already done that. I'm waiting until I'm done my vase before I do I'm gonna do depth on my vase first, and then I'll do the leaf and berry sprig on top. So my vase is it's not as full as the inspiration. It's similar, but I have more of a sparse bouquet. It's similar to the inspiration, but it's not exactly the same, and it's not supposed to be exactly the same. This was my take based on the inspiration, right? And that's why we're here. Okay, so I have the dark green on my leaves. I want to look around and say, do I want to add any leaves anywhere else? And I think I'm going to keep it really simple. I don't think I'm going to put any more green leaves on. Just that's me for today. The end of this sprig is all berries. For me, that's okay. At the end of this class, if I always want to go in and add some more, I can. But I'm happy with this right now. I am going to take a little bit of white. And make a lighter green. So clean off your brush before you stick it into your white container. Pro tip. So there's a little bit of white. I'm gonna mix it right in. Just you wanna make a lighter color. And this actually has a little bit of a yellow hue to it, so if you wanna get a little crazy with me, you can put a little bit of yellow nearby. And if you want to get a little crazy and mix a little bit of yellow to make it like a little bit of a lime green, this could be a really fun accent. See that? It kind of added a little bit of a yellow hue. So this is white in it, so it's going to help stand out on top of the background, which is quite fun. Take a minute to mix enough of this. All right, and then I'm gonna add a little touch of the lighter green here and there. Now mine is standing out not as abstract as I want, so what I can do is I can rough this up a little bit. I don't want it to look I don't want there to be a line. So I'm just kind of smudging this in a little bit with some of the other green, just to kind of give it a little bit more of like a kind of an artsy look. See how I just smudged it in with a little bit of green on the tip of my brush? For me, it looks so much better than just a line of the lighter green. So I'm gonna be playful here on how I apply the green. So see how those are like lines of, I'm taking a little bit of the emerald and I'm just gonna kind of smudge it in a little bit. You can always bring in more dark green if you need to. So if I take a little bit of the dark green, just to kind of make it look a little less obvious. So for me, I like the way that looks. Be playful on how you apply it. I think is the goal here. And you could do this, you could have done this the same time as a lot of artists do that, as you bring in the dark and the green at the same time, the dark and the light rather. That's what a lot of oil painters do. Since oil takes such a long time, the blending techniques you can get with oil are really tremendous. So for me, I'm just kind of bringing in a little bit of dark green again, just to kind of help blend in the light. So do what you want there. I'm just kind of playing with different techniques to share with you. But I'm just bringing a little touch. That dark and light contrast. Something I'm being a little playful with. Sometimes people use like a palette knife to kind of be playful with some of these textures. Do what works for you here. Okay, you can see there's some lighter contrast over here, and there's not a ton of lighter over here. So I can just bring in a little bit of extra lightness. And while that's wet, I could take a little bit of the dark and kind of smudge it in, just like I did over here. So it all depends on what you want to do, right? This is where those are the personal artist choices of where you want the lights and the darks to show up, right? But it's kind of fun to talk through it and to see different styles, right? I'm sure other people who are participating in this event or class may be doing their own thing. All right, so I'm gonna let that dry. I'm fairly happy with that. I want you to be happy with your leaf shapes. It will take you a little longer to play with some of that alternative color, so feel free to do that. But to keep things going here, I am going to take my crimson and I'm going to add a little bit of dark red to one side of each of my, and you could also use a burnt umber if you have a burnt umber color. Also may be called burnt sienna. You have a burnt sienna, it's like a brown. So what we'll be doing is we'll be doing a darker red color on one side and a little bit of a highlight on the berries. So we'll do the berries. And again, today's class, it could take as long or as short as you want it to. This is really we take our time. So I'm just gonna be playful with a little crimson, a little bit of burnt umber right here. Just kind of mixing these together. The berries, you don't need to use a lot of the dark colors. I'm just gonna use a little bit. I'm really gonna be, I'll just do a little bit of outlining, really. And then I'll be doing some lighter highlighting on top. So I'm just kind of outlining some of these berries. On the left or the right, you can choose. Just add a little bit of shading, and you can see I'm doing that down here a little bit. These are choices on how much you may or may not want to bring in. Some of these pink berries I'm just painting red really quick. This is one of those paintings where you could take 2 hours, you could take 3 hours, you could take 4 hours. There's just choices you have to make here on how much time you want to spend. So I'm just going to do a little bit of dark accenting. If it's too different than the red, I can mix some of these colors together. I'm not going to go too crazy. I'm just going to add a little bit of dark contrast because that's just one of the choices that I want to make as an artist today. Because I'm going to do the same thing with a lighter red after. So I'm just doing a little bit. I am mixing some of this burnt umber and the red together, so it's not as such a harsh contrast. There. And I'm just going to do a little bit of a smudge here and there on the rounded edges of these berries. I'm obviously staying within the lines, but this is just adding a little bit of a shaded contrast to these berries. I'm going to do the same thing with a lighter color. It doesn't have to be on the left, it doesn't have to always be on the right. You can choose. I'm just kind of switching from the left to the right, to be honest. Depth and where the light and the dark sources come from. You could be really definitive and really accurate around where the light source is in the painting, but for today it doesn't matter too much. Well, the light source is more important than this darker contrast. So I'm just kind of giving these berries a little bit of a darker, it's barely a darker red, but it's just kind of a secondary color. especially if you can see the berries, the branches through the berries, you could do a heavy second color. This is where you can kind of, if you need to take a couple extra coats, you can. But we'll be mindful of time here. So I'm just adding a little contrast. I don't want these berries to get too dark. So I want them to still be nice and red in color. But this is a nice complement. And these berries are also going to have a little bit of like black or brown on them too for like the berry head area, which will really make them look like berries. So if these just look like little flowers or little red balls, we're going to actually make them look like berries with little black dots. And we haven't put any berries down below yet, so if you wanted to do any berries down below, you could do that right now. So if I do any berries down here, I'm just mixing together a little bit of that light pink again. And maybe I'll do a little bit of a berry here, a little bit of a berry here. Maybe these are just going to be, that's a little cluster of berries that are on my table here. And I'll let these little berries dry right here, and then I'll paint on them so they're a little bit more red in color. So there's a little bit of berries down here on my table. If you wanted to add something like that, you could. And I may add a couple of berries over here as well, maybe a little lower. And these are berries that are just right near each other. 1, 2, 3, and they're down here at the bottom. And then maybe I'll add just a couple of berries over here, and I'll add just a few kind of green leaves as well, which could be kind of fun. So I'm just going to let those little berries right there dry. So these are just some berries on the table. I add some green leaves and some sprigs in a minute. Okay, so I did some second coats for my berries. The other thing that we'll do is we'll add a little bit of highlighting to the berries, which we talked about next. So, but we want them to dry first. So maybe as our berries are drying and our leaves are drying, we'll go to our vase and we'll do a little bit of detail work for our vase, which is perfect. So we want our vase to be totally painted in red. I'm letting all these berries dry. We'll do our berry highlighting detail after, but we'll do our vase next, which will be really empowering because we just mixed a darker red. So I have a little bit of a darker red over here. And this darker red, we're gonna have a shaded area on our vase. So on the right side of our vase, I'm gonna use, this is like a number 3 brush. I'm giving it a little bit of a shaded area. So I'm keeping, I have a little water on my brush too, which is really nice. I'm keeping a little bit of this edge still red, but with a little water, I'm kind of moving this down and around. You can also use your finger to smudge. We're creating a little bit of some darker shading right here. And we're going to bring this just down along the bottom just a little bit. So we're kind of highlighting that this is the shaded side of the vase. Water can help here. And it's just going to kind of come around the bottom. So you can play with your finger, you could play with a paper towel, you could use your brush. I'm using my finger. Play with how this paint is sticking. Play with how it's coming over. See how I'm kind of smudging it over? You can get a little close to the edge. Just don't cover up that right edge. You can round your vase. These are kind of rounded smudges. And it will start to dry up, which is good. See that? So you can do as much or as little as you wish. You can also bring in a little bit, just coming up the right side, just a little, the left side, excuse me, just a little bit. If you wanted to add a little contrast on the left. Okay. So you can bring this down. I'm using my brush. We are going to add a little bit, we're going to add some lighter contrast in here as well. But we're just doing some nice dark contrast first. And you can make this as dark as you want here. So I could go a little darker using my brush. Okay. And then what we're going to do is, with our white, I'm just going to be daring here to show you. We are going to add some white, kind of like a white oval here to create a highlighted spot. Like this is where the light is hitting. Maybe we'll do a little bit of an outline. So the left side of this vase is where the light is hitting. And this is like really white right in here. So I'm just doing soft, simple brush strokes. To create a really strong highlighted spot right here on this vase. I'm not going to come down too much, but you can see I'm just kind of creating a highlighted spot here. You can have a little bit of white on the bottom. And you can play with this. You can put a little water on your brush. I'm doing really soft, simple brush strokes. You can see how it's just slowly blending it in. And I'm not going to come down too far here. You can see I'm doing a little bit of like roundedness to kind of show. You can do a little bit of white over here to show the roundedness of your vase. Not too much. You can blend it in with your finger if you need to. Oops. Don't drop your brush on your picture like me. So you can make this as bright, brilliant white as you want, or you could keep it more soft and subtle. You can do a little bit up here. Do a little bit here, just a little bit to show the roundedness. Like there's just a little glimmer. Okay. If you do something you don't like, you can always paint over it. Okay. I'm going to do a little bit more here. This is just white paint. This is like a really highlighted kind of shiny spot on my vase. Okay, then I'm going to stop and I'm just going to reflect, okay? Now while I'm doing that, I can play with a little bit of my like light pink or white and give some areas of my berries a little bit of a light accent. You can also use yellow too. So you could use yellow or ochre. So let me just do ochre with a little bit of white. And I'm going to do this as like some of my berry accents, like the highlighted areas. So I'm just going to put a little bit on the touch of some of the berries. Except I don't want that line texture. I want it to be more of like a smudged texture. So I'm just going to kind of smudge that in a little bit. So you could do the line, we do the line depth technique often in these classes. I'm going to try something a little bit different today. I think I'm going to have to do like a blended color here of like red. Yeah. I wanted to do like a red and ochre blend to kind of get it to be the way that I want. And I might have to do it with a little bit of red paint. So just like I did with the dark red, I'm going to do the red with the ochre. So you can play with how you want to add in your lighted spotted areas. I mixed this ochre and red color right here. So it's kind of like, it's not an orange, but it's kind of like a lighter. And I'm using this just to kind of give a little bit of an edge or a highlighted spot to some of these berries. So this is just me being playful on how I create the lighting source for some of these berries. You can do it on the opposite edge of the dark area. Just be playful on where you want to add a lighter source. If you don't want to add the lighter source, you don't have to. I'm just here to kind of show you. This is actually kind of like a pink color, actually. So, and in person, it's more red. So you can make this as light or as dark as you want to, really. Totally up to you. We are going to add little black spots to these berries as our final berry detail. And today's class can take as long or as short as you need it to. We're at about an hour and 40 minutes right now. So typically with detailed paintings like this, they take a while, right? And it's okay. We did a lot of details in today's class, and I think it's a good thing to just to kind of slow down and for you to have those choices. You may have breezed through some of the areas I may have spent more time on, and that's fine. It's always okay for you to consider where you may want to spend extra time. So in the final steps of this painting, you're really going to be adding in some delicate details like the leaves down here for the berries, and then considering where you might want to have any darker or lighter contrasts for the berries and or leaves. We were playing around a little bit for the vase. If you wanted to add in some more green leaves or green berries for the top of your vase, you can. I may or may not add more green kind of coming on top. Those are, again, choices that I can make here along the way. The only other considerations is consider if you want to add any more contrast to your vase. I could certainly add some more darker contrast to the vase if I wanted to, and I could make the white a little bit brighter. So those are all things for you to think about as you just take your time with some of these final steps. If you wanted to add more green foliage, you could add more green foliage. I kept my subject pretty straightforward here. There's only one last technique or tip that I'll share with you is adding the little black dots for the berries on the inside of some of these berries. So I'm going to find one of the smallest brushes I have, and I'm just going to use a tiny touch of black on the tip of the brush. And you can figure out where you might want to add these or not, but I'm just going to do little kind of circles or dots to add little kind of mouths for some of these berries. So if you don't want to do this, you don't have to. You could add a little water with your black. So if you wanted to put a little bit of black paint on your picture, you can. I'm just going to add, you can make like little stars. You could just do little dots. These are just kind of where some of the berries, like the head of the berry. So those are optional. If you don't like that, you don't have to do it. But that just might give your berries a little bit of a finishing touch. You don't have to do them on all the berries either, and you can also play with some of the placement of maybe where. So I'm not going to put these on all the berries. And if you do somewhere, like if I did too many down here, I can always cover some up. But maybe like 2 or 3 berries. Add just a tiny touch of black. This black paint is actually not as thick as my other paint, so I'm just going to do a little touch, a little dot here and there, and that should just give the look that I want. So you can see how the contrast is nice with the black paint. I'm just doing like a little tip of the brush, and I'm not doing it on all the berries. I'm kind of doing it on every other one. So for me, it just makes them look a little bit more natural. Again, I'm just doing like every other one, just adding a little touch. And I personally like that contrast. I think it's really nice. If you do a little black dot somewhere that you don't like, guess what? You can always put a little bit of red paint on it. So as an example, if there's some down here that I did too many black dots, I could easily take a little bit of red paint, look at this, and just cover some of these up. I have water on my brush, which is not helping, but let's see here. I'm running out of red paint. So I hope that you enjoyed today's painting class. If you have any questions, please let me know. I am excited to see how your work went, and I look forward to checking in with each of you as well. And I'm just going to cover up just some of these little black dots right here, just ever so slightly. There. You don't need them on all of them. A little bit here and a little bit there is fine. Perfect. But I want to thank you so much for being here today, and I look forward to seeing your work, and I hope you have a great day today. Take care.